everyone, and welcome to my latest Substack Live in an ongoing series of changing beliefs and changing lives, in which I am interviewing other writers over 50, and we are talking about the ways our beliefs and our lives have changed since we entered our 50s, and the ways that we feel better about our lives now than our younger lives and the wisdom we have gained. And today's guest is Kara Westerman, and I am thrilled to have her with me. And I will briefly share a little bit about me for those who don't know me, and then invite her to do the same. My Substack is Changing Lives, and it started out strictly about mental health and my own mental health struggles and recovery from a severe depression brought on by the unexpected and painful end of my former career. And it has since expanded to encompass spiritual health as well, because of course the two are intertwined. And I now do a lot of video posts and audio posts more so than strictly written ones, because I love these interactions with others. And I have a Zoom group coming up, my next spiritual support group, which is limited to 12 people. And the last one had pagans and atheists and witches. And we had a wonderful, diverse group and great conversations and really in depth connections. So I hope the same will be true of this group, which starts on May 4th. And now, Kara, over to you.
Hi, I'm Kara Westerman, and I wish I could see us together because the way the screen is showing it on my iPad, I can't see your face. So
Oh,
I know, and I'm wondering if there's another way, another
I have only
view.
ever done them on my phone, with my phone
Oh,
in
okay,
vertical orientation. So I can't help you with the iPad thing. Sorry. Maybe someone
okay.
who is live
I
with us
can't,
can type in the chat.
I can't see your eyes, so it's hard to talk to you without seeing your eyes, but I will try. Um, so I'm on Substack for about a year and a half, and I'm co-creating a memoir with my late husband who died in 2020. And I run a writers group called Writers Daily Dive, which meets Eastern Time weekdays at 1 o'clock, and we write in silence together. We meet, we chat a little, we set our intentions, and then we write. And it's really the way that I created it in order to be able to finish my book because, like you, I guess, I struggle with a few mental illnesses and depression, anxiety, and the way that life moves, I needed a through line through it to be able to finish the book. And so I figured, well, if I have to show up for others, I'll show up. And I have. So that's what I'm doing on Substack. And I'm meeting with you. I'm delighted to meet with you.
Wonderful. And yes, that's so true what you shared about kind of creating the group that you knew that you needed. That's exactly what I did with my Zoom spiritual support group. Um, Myself and just everyone I knew was so desperate for authentic connections and a safe space to talk about our devastation at the election results, and of course, everything that's happened since then, and spirituality that didn't feel safe to talk about in some settings, or that some people had been condemned for believing or experiencing things that were outside of their faith communities or
Mm.
society's accepted uh, realm, so, shall we say. So yeah, that those safe
I'm in the
spaces.
right place.
Yeah, and I was very fascinated to read your description and what you just now shared about writing a memoir with your late husband. That is definitely something I have not heard before. And I saw on your Substack page that you specifically mentioned that it's about, among other things, transitions, sobriety, resurrection. So I'm very curious. Say more about that.
Okay. Um, my husband, I called him what did I call him? The transformation artist. We had met in AA, which is a whole spiritual system in itself, right? And so that I think he and I would probably clock as the first big sort of revolution in changing who we were as people. I'm 23 years sober this year, and he was over 30 years sober when he died. But then he also changed his gender. So he became a male after living most of his life as a female. He didn't do it until 40, but uh, it was such a captivating part of his who he was. Um, and he also made a change in career very late in life, and I'm always changing things. So that's one of the things that I was just I don't think other people really were able to handle that in him. He always said he liked living on the edge. And we were always seeking with the books we read to each other. We were always reading spiritual books. We were reading anything from Emmett Fox to Terence McKenna to Carlos Castaneda. We were practicing the initial instructions on how to wake up in your dreams. So all of this was going on. And then when he passed away in 2020, I just like my whole life changed, right? He was he was really the first time I had felt safe and home, and I'd found my person.
Mhm.
And he died of lung cancer. And I'm a curious person, so I wanted to be there for all of it. So I was with him the whole time, and I was with him pretty much every minute while he died in the hospital. We got married about 5 days before he died because we didn't really care, but because of the house he wanted to leave me, and we were caught sort of like, oh, we have to do this now. We didn't realize that he was going to leave so soon. So I was basically just got into bed with him in the hospital and was there for 4 or 5 days. So I watched that whole process, and they wouldn't let me. As a matter of fact, I wanted to stay and help wash his body and prepare it and put it in the bag, and they said no. So I really wanted to, I guess when I want to understand and I want to see what's going on. Like some people, that makes them nervous. For me, the more information I have, the calmer I become. So
Mhm.
I wanted to be there for the whole thing. And I still regret not insisting that I be there for that final, because historically, traditionally, women are the ones who wash and prepare the body, and it's like a rite of passage. But they scared me. And but what happened after he died is I thought, well, I'm here because he died maybe 2 weeks before COVID lockdown.
Oh.
So suddenly I was in this house with all of his family's things, a 100-year-old house, and alone. And so I just decided, well, since I'm already here, let's just go further. So I started studying really out there things.
Hmm.
Tibetan Buddhism and dream yoga and lucid dreaming. And I had some really amazing experiences. Um, but why it's a collaboration is because he was a writer who never got around to writing. And so he left a lot of bits and pieces of his writing. So when I went through the archives and the files in the attic, I found descriptions of his whole life.
Wow.
And yeah, so that was a big change to realize that this could happen to me too. If I don't put this book forefront in my life, it's never going to get done. Like there's never going to be that moment when it's all like he wanted to get everything in order, and there's never a moment when everything is in order. Like it doesn't exist.
Right.
So, and even now I've put the home here up for sale because I can't maintain it the way he did.
Mhm.
And I want somebody to maintain it and love it, and I want to finish before I die. I just want to do one goddamn thing.
Yeah.
I want to finish this book.
So how long
So
had you known him before his illness and death?
I had known him for probably since we knew each other and were friends. I knew him for at least 10 years as an acquaintance, then maybe 3 or 4 years as a friend, and then we were together for 5 years before he died. Um, we It was a strange thing that I needed an interview subject for a radio and podcast course I was taking. And I asked him, he was my friend, and I thought he'd be a fascinating person to interview. And so he came to my little room a couple nights. We recorded an interview. The subject was transformation and the story of his life. And then I listened to it back on the playback, and I realized we'd fallen in love with each other and that it was a problem. And I just
Why was it a
knew it
problem?
because he was married.
Mm.
And so I figured, well, let's just not talk about it. It'll go away if I just leave it alone. Don't invite him for any more interviews, and I'll just keep this under my hat. But it was so obvious in the interviews
Mhm.
how delighted we were with each other. And so the shit did hit the fan eventually because he wanted to know why things were different. And finally, I told him. I think I said something like, "You idiot! Don't you realize that we're in love with each other?" He was like, "What?" So, yeah.
That is quite a story. And had he already transitioned when you first knew him, or okay?
Yes, he had. Yes, he had. I didn't realize it was such a long process. That it would take that it takes 20 years for people to fully come into their new gender. So it's a gradual process, and so I knew him maybe in the middle of it, and then when he was fully transitioned, and yeah, it was one of the most delightful things that I loved about him is that he was able to like make these huge leaps in faith, in um, just in the faith that he would still be there when he got to the end of whatever crazy thing he was doing. And I guess we took a leap of faith to go into our relationship. But I mean, he used to say, "Surprise me." That was sort of his spiritual mantra, "Surprise me." And we got surprised.
Sounds like it for
We
sure.
definitely got
Well,
surprised.
so since this is all about changing beliefs, and you mentioned kind of exploring those out there beliefs, were you raised with more traditional beliefs that you rejected, or other beliefs that you changed for you?
No, no, I was raised actually with very little belief. There were some rituals that my mother loved in Christianity, but there wasn't a lot of belief there. And I think there's a great story about my father being a young, maybe a 10-year-old boy who was proselytizing with his Bible on the school bus and was told not to do it anymore. But then he was a total atheist when I as an adult.
Interesting.
So yeah, we didn't go to church. The first experience I had with any kind of spirituality was AA, which might surprise people. But there you really have to come to an understanding that you're not running the world. And it can be anything. It just can't be you. So a lot of people use the group as their higher power at first, and some people continue to be atheists. And I suppose I'm kind of an atheist because now I study Tibetan Buddhism, and that is really a non-religion. It's more of a philosophy, I think of it
Right.
as. And but no, I came from a non spiritual background, I would say, and now I'm finding my way. Did you come from a spiritual?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the former career that ended unexpectedly and painfully was that I was a pastor, and I was actually a
Oh,
co-pastor with my husband. And
oh,
we, in 2020, of course, the COVID pandemic changed the world, but one thing it changed at our church was that my husband and I were very safety conscious and wanted to follow CDC guidelines, and our church council did not. They did agree to shut down in May of 2020 at the height of things, or March maybe, whenever the kind of the order of things for everyone was you have to shut down and isolate. But then they voted to resume worship in an indoor sanctuary with windows that could not be opened in July of 2020 before there were
whoa,
vaccines. They were
wow.
not overly concerned about strictly having 6 feet of separation, like my husband and I were. Um, and so that was the primary conflict. But then um, one day, totally out of the blue, the council president and summoned my husband and I to a meeting, and he and the vice president informed us that the council had decided in our absence that they wanted our immediate resignation and for us to be gone in 2 weeks. And this had never even been discussed as a possibility with us before. We had no idea it was being considered. So, needless to say, that was a very
Wow.
devastating experience. And then we subsequently, both individually and separately, interviewed with other congregations and were very disillusioned to discover how many in our progressive denomination, which has LGBTQ bishops and other, very progressive stances officially, that the churches we interviewed with all had many Trump supporters and openly racist members and all the rest. And so we both decided on our own that we could not, in good conscience, continue to be pastors, and that for us, following Jesus was pretty much the opposite of what church people were doing. Um, so, yeah, that's my
That's,
religious background.
whoa, that's huge because you're sitting with the same people. And suddenly you say to yourself, were these people always racist? And like, wait, these are the same people. Why, either are we stupid or how did this all, bring all this
Exactly.
to
And I'm
light?
normally a very intuitive person. And, people, I'm just so aware of people's internal thoughts and feelings. And sometimes they're blown away. They share things with me that they don't normally share with even close friends. And like, I'm a complete stranger in the airport or the laundromat. That's been true my whole life, not just, when I was a pastor. So yeah, for me, especially, it was like, how could I have missed all these signs? Um, and then on top of that, the church owned the housing we lived in, and the church was our
Wow.
faith community. And so, and our sole source of income for both of us. And this was during COVID. It's not like we could quickly, easily get other jobs. So, yeah, a whole series of devastation and transitions, to say the least. And so that plunged me into a very severe depression that almost ended my life. And thankfully, I recovered. And ultimately, that became my transformation, my realization that, okay, what I'm called to do is, number one, to speak out against all this hate and violence and demonstrate from the Bible and Christian teachings that no, this is not something Jesus would be okay with. And these people are flat out lying about a lot of things, and it's not okay. And number two, to provide safe spaces for people who need spiritual support, both Christians who didn't share that mindset, and non-Christians, atheists, whoever. That, I mean, I believe we're all spiritual beings, and we're all connected to whatever we choose to call that higher power, inner wisdom, whatever. And so therefore we all have spiritual experiences. They can happen anywhere to anyone, and it's healthy to talk about them and to explore what we believe, why we believe it, what nourishes our souls and what harms them. And if we have internalized those harmful beliefs, how do we let go of them? So that's kind of become my new mission in life. And
That's
I
great.
started out as a freelance writer a couple years ago, and wrote some political and religious, like investigative feature articles debunking Christian nationalism and exposing the specific stories of people harmed by it. And then I did that on other media outlets, and my Substack was only about mental health. And then
Okay.
I realized, okay, I can't just stay silent about the spiritual part of this. They're too interconnected, especially since the people harming mental health the most are the people doing it in the name of their spiritual beliefs.
And don't you think that it's intertwined with your idea of talking to people over 50, that it's a level of maturity, that it's like sometimes I think the evangelical communities are keeping people in this state of perpetual like teenagerhood or something. They're like
Yes, submission to a
stunted
parent figure
development.
authority. Yes. Mhm.
Because it really doesn't matter which thing you pick, like they say in AA, it's just not you. And that, or in Buddhism, they talk about these revolutions in outlook. These
Mhm.
revolutions, as you mature, hopefully, you become less the center of the universe and you start seeing things very differently.
And you
So,
also are no longer willing to surrender your power to another human, to or
that's true.
society in general, to dictate what you can and cannot do or believe, where, whatever,
Right.
you know.
It's like the map. I always think there's a territory, and then there are all these maps, like 1,000 maps. And if you grab onto this map and make it holy and say, no, 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 ho, ho, you can't take a left here. You have to take a right here. When there's another map that shows a different route, then you're really you're stunting yourself, you know? So
Yes.
the map is not the territory.
And even, even if you use the same map as someone else, it's not an absolute map. Like there are multiple different ways of understanding various verses in the Bible, and there's the whole process, by which its various authors wrote it, and other people translated it, and decided which books would become the Bible, on and on and on.
Oh, yeah.
um,
The story of that is amazing. Just amazing.
but yeah,
One of the
so my
things that
religious beliefs obviously have changed. That's been a big shift for me. Although to be fair, I never bought into some Christian theology. Like I never believed that there was an eternal hell that God condemned some people to, either because they weren't Christian or because they you know did something bad or whatever. Um, I always believed that God's love was for everyone. There wasn't a favored religion, nation, whatever.
right.
Um, but even that, I discovered there were things about Christianity that were not intentionally cruel or exclusive, but yet I couldn't buy into, like baptism. Okay, we baptize babies, and part of the ceremony is saying, like, we welcome you into God's family. And I was like, wait a minute, they're already in God's family, whether or not they're ever baptized. This doesn't make them a member of God's family. Things like that. Um, and also, there were things that Christianity taught that were not okay, like tarot cards or what astrology, anything, that I was like, what's wrong with these? They're helping
Yeah,
people. If they like them, why is that a problem?
right. I mean, the reason I'm calling our book A Suitable Vessel for Magic is it's often said that you have to have a suitable vessel for information or grace to enter, right?
Mhm.
But also this idea that I'm here for the magic. I really am. That religion and magic were so intertwined in ancient times, and that feeling you get when you meet, I don't even know what to call it. There are no words to describe sort of the grace and the feeling of bliss when you kind of are there for a few seconds or
Mhm.
minutes at a time. And but it is magical. And love the magical traditions. So when I started studying Tibetan Buddhism, this particular strain, Vajrayana and Dzogchen, a great deal of, well, what surprised me, first of all, is that the instructions for practicing dream yoga and waking up in your dreams are exactly the same instructions that are given in the Mesoamerican tradition that Carlos Castaneda was writing about. And nobody really knows in his books what is 100% true, but what is true is that the books are a series of dreams within dreams and a series of exercises to enable you to practice waking up in your dreams. And a great deal of what we do in the meditation practice in Tibetan Buddhism is, how can I explain it? If you, after my husband died, I had lucid dream experiences that I believe he was part of, because I don't think I could have gotten there on my own. And one of the first instructions in any lucid dream tradition is to see your hand in a dream. That's the instruction you give yourself before you go to bed. Know that it is your hand and know that you're in a dream. So the initial step into this breathtaking world of being awake in your dreams could take years. And it took my husband a long time, but the year before he died, he was sitting right here. And I came down one morning and he told me that he woke up in his dream, and it was boom. If you've never had it happen, it means that the narrative and the plot of the dream, you suddenly sliced through and you are awake and and I've had many of them where I run into the next room to try and tell people that we're awake, we can do anything we want. I've had them where I'm jumping off a cliff and I can fly, but I've never had them long enough. People who practice this are able to stay for hours. But the idea is that the reason you know you're in a nighttime dream is because you have the daytime to be a contrast. So what's the vantage point where you could see that this lifetime, that this is a dream? And so the training is taking places on both these levels. So to see that, I think this is a lot of spiritual traditions, to see that something bigger is going on, to see that there's something inside you, like Christos, or they call it this little bindu in Buddhism, this flame of you that
Yes, Christians
actually,
call it the Holy Spirit.
right,
And
that
even though
can
some have tried
meet.
to domesticate it, the idea is that it lives within each person.
That's
And
correct.
yeah, is that it's our inner wisdom and that divine love that's broader, wiser, all encompassing.
Yeah, and they even say in Buddhism, if you meet the Buddha, I think, what is the saying? Kill him or something? Because it's an imposter, because the Buddha is Christos, right? It's
Right.
and so so this idea that you can develop muscles where most of your waking life you are in sort of a communion with the idea that this is all illusion, is basically what it is. And the more you can develop that in your dream life, the more you can see it in real life, and the more you become facile. And the ultimate idea, which has a lot to do with Christ, who I'm sure studied these teachings because I think he was a bodhisattva, which means that on the cross, he declared that he would come back until everybody was saved. That's the bodhisattva vow that people studying different types of Buddhism proclaim. And what he also proclaimed was that anyone can do it, and that you don't die. And so the ultimate idea in the tradition I'm studying is that if you can train yourself to it's a lot about cutting in Buddhism. Like, I'm not my hand, I'm not my mind, I'm not my face, I'm not. Where is this thing that is the one that's saying this, right?
Hmm.
Where is this little light that will survive and that travels from death to death and from life to life? How can I become so familiar with that entity so that I can be so comfortable with letting go of my other identities? Because I'm going to lose my teeth, my hair, my
Right.
body. I'm going to lose my mind, right? I'm
Hmm.
going to lose everything that I think is me. How do I practice every day, understanding that these things aren't me? But what is the thing that's tasteless, odorless, invisible? If you can develop that, apparently, at death, you can travel with it. It's a vessel. And you can actually direct your spirit to go to a place more favorable. You have a little bit of agency as opposed to just waking up in the next dream and starting
Interesting.
all over again. Isn't it? It's really fascinating.
I have done a little bit of studying of some Buddhist traditions, and I'm very drawn to it. And in fact, I know Christians who also call themselves Buddhists because, as you said, Buddhism isn't a religion; it's more of a philosophy. And there are definitely similar beliefs among all religious traditions and non-religious spiritual people about loving your neighbor as yourself and recognizing our interconnectedness, and that when you harm someone else you also harm yourself, they are part of you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. um, so yeah.
Interestingly enough, in Buddhism, it's all about power. So it's not because it's morally a good idea, although it is, but it's kind of a safety valve so that somebody like Trump couldn't use these techniques to gain more power. There's all along this path, in other words, compassion and empathy and all these things that we think of are moral things, they're all basically things that are jet fuel, my teacher says. They are jet fuel in your practice, and without them, you can't proceed further. So it's kind of like the people who are all for themselves are going to kind of get left behind because they're not going to have this accelerant in their practice, which is, I want everybody to be okay. It's
Mhm.
powerful.
Definitely. Yeah, I have read recently a book by a Buddhist psychologist, Rick Hansen, called "Hardwiring Happiness." That it's mental health related, all about the neurons in your brain and rewiring the neural patterns, pathways, um, so that you focus more on positive experiences than negative ones, which is our natural cognitive bias. And anyway, the point is like the overlap between mental health and spiritual health and beliefs and practices, and how when we can um, get in touch with, as you said, that part of us that is not just part of us, it's the larger whole that we are connected with and can channel and all the rest. But yeah, it's I mean it transforms the world, and the scientific studies now are just so fascinating to me about things like how a small group of people meditating can transform a community, even though the rest of the community doesn't even know those people are meditating and doesn't share their belief or whatever. So yeah, I think that our beliefs are very much more powerful than we realize.
As we
um
can see with the political climate, which
yes.
happened because of these strange shifts in beliefs. Like,
Hmm.
when did it happen that, like, the government wasn't supposed to work for everybody? How did this, just slowly everybody turn into, how did greed become the operative thing?
Mhm.
And that happened belief by belief by belief, even in churches, which is astonishing. I
Yeah.
um I was going to say that the other thing that happened that would have happened anyway if I hadn't when my husband died, even if I hadn't decided, okay, I'm going to study death. I'm going to study the Egyptians. I'm going to study the Eleusinian mysteries. I'm going to study lucid dreaming. I'm just going to know everything there is to know about death. Just naturally, what it did, the gift of it was that I now sort of have a mission and a mandate, which I didn't know I needed or wanted, but I'm so compelled to finish this book and to keep writing. And I did not know how short time was. And I was saying to my friends around that time, I'm like the Watchtower ladies. Remember the ladies who would knock on your door with Watchtower
Hmm.
pamphlets and tell you, um, how short, how late it is. I felt like I was trying to tell everybody, no, 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 you don't realize how little time you have. And that stuck with me so intensely that it just it fired up a lot of my creative life, because I can see how a day is a life. How you live your day is how you live your life, and the addiction to. I was thinking about the question that you first sent me before we talked, about what beliefs you used to have, and I think there was this belief that if I did it all right, that things would accumulate, like things added up to something. And I didn't realize that that is just blatantly untrue. That you think that until you reach like probably 62, which is where I am. And now I can see in other people, like those people who walk on the beach, like power walk and stuff. I'm like, oh, they didn't get the memo yet. Like, doesn't matter how much you power walk, you're still gonna die. Like, it's really late. Like, not that you shouldn't power walk, but I can see it in people who've matured enough to recognize how short life is, and people who think that there's this attainable spot they can get to, and then everything will be okay.
Yeah, and I do think people are realizing that at a much younger age now because it's
Oh,
more obvious in U.S. society that following the rules and having an higher education or climbing the corporate ladder or
mm,
always getting good grades or obeying your boss's orders, whatever it might be. Um, None of those things work. In the past, there were a lot of people that stayed with the same company their entire career and retired with a nice pension, and following the rules worked for them. But now for most people, those rules don't work, and for some of us they never would have anyway. We're just not wired that way. But
now did you feel like when you lost your livelihood, like I felt like when I lost my husband, I lost all the meaning in my life, and I had to find, like, really recreate a whole new reason for sticking around, because they're really, like, I was in probably the same state you were. I could not find any reasons to stick around, and
yes, absolutely. And the other piece of that, which you alluded to, was the main belief that I had to change as I got older was the idea that my entire worth or reason for existence was to achieve and to get other people's approval, and that doing the right things would guarantee either no suffering or at least a lot less of it and more success and happiness and so I had no idea how entirely achievement based my self worth was until suddenly I wasn't a high achiever that everyone admired. And so yes, that's exactly it. The reason I wanted to die was because I had no purpose. Although I will say that the one of the key reasons that I am still alive is because my soulmate, my husband, who I've been married to since 1991, um, I couldn't do that to him. I loved him too much, and I knew how. But the flip side is when you're severely depressed, I was in my own mind, I could convince myself that even though he didn't think so, he would be better off without me. and I was a burden, and ultimately he would, meet someone else and they would have a happier life than he could ever have with me. When I'm sane in my right mind, I can see how crazy that is. But in the
But
grip
there's
of
a fine line between like, let's look life really in the face. There really isn't any reason, right? We all have to make our own reasons, and then falling over that line into, I'm just going to check out. Like, it's really because then you could fall into the other trap of everything's going to be okay. And I get so upset when people say everything's going to be
yes.
okay because I
Have you read
know that it's not true and that it's better to learn that and adjust, you know?
Yes. And there are both secular and religious versions of that. The religious version is God has a plan, everything, the secular is everything happens for a reason, the universe guides you, and the law of attraction that you can attract, or anything and everything you want, good things. And the flip side, if dwell on negative things, then you will attract them into your life. And it's another balance thing. On the one hand, yes, of course, our mindset is hugely important. And if we don't believe we're capable of something, we probably won't even attempt it. But the flip side is, you know, no, if a parent is, if their child gets, is killed in a mass shooting at school, that parent was not thinking when their child left that morning,
No.
oh, I'm so worried my kid's going to get killed at school today. Or even if they were, they didn't cause it to happen. Yeah, yeah. And so there's just a whole destructive flip side of it. And the same thing with the positive. The idea, that if you just do the right things and live the right way,
Right.
you've got it
It's
made.
all going to
Everything
work
will be
out.
fine.
Yeah,
Kate Bowler
that's
wrote a wonderful book called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved.
whose book is that?
Kate Bowler,
Okay.
Bowler. It was a
Okay.
runaway bestseller a while back, and then she wrote a follow up, No Cure for Being Human. Uh, anyway,
Sounds
yeah,
good.
I mean,
I just love
exactly
how
that.
practical the Buddhists are. Like in Pema Chodron's books, she would have chapters like "Abandon all hope," like or hopelessness and death. That also always used to be just this idea that one needs to give up this false hope in order to be on a level ground, in order to see reality, right? And you can really do yourself a number by. I just love how practical the Buddhists are and how they everything is really scientific and you there are no beliefs. You have to go investigate for yourself. And I
Right.
love it.
There's no one way of connecting with the divine that's better, much less the only way. Um, and yeah, and we're all interconnected, whether we acknowledge it or not. And so many other things, especially the part about killing the Buddha.
If you meet
If
the
you meet
Buddha,
him,
kill him.
that and I had a conversation with another person, Nancy Norbeck, about the danger of trusting any coach, but especially a spiritual guru or any other
Mm,
teacher who claims to have the right answers and know exactly what you should or must believe or do, and basically putting your life in their hands and not trusting your own intuition, and
right.
thinking that their path is the only one to success, to happiness, to enlightenment, whatever it may be.
But
um,
then that's also a balance because I also have friends who are working. Since I'm a 23-year member of AA, I had to be really I had to learn what discipline was.
yes,
And
and
if I
have a
hadn't
sponsor,
learned
and
how to
yeah.
follow directions, right, I would have never been able to stay sober and I might be probably would be dead by now. But but finding a teacher in a religious discipline who has the map, as I said before, and I can't go. I can. What does the Dalai Lama say? Do you need a guru? And the Dalai Lama says, no. Do you need a teacher? No, you don't need a teacher, but it saves you a lot of time. And if you're going to climb that mountain or you're going to take the car to Toledo, best to stop at the gas station and get a map because you don't realize how short your life is. And I see so many people just fooling around and thinking, I'm going to get to that someday. And yeah, I'm practicing meditation like this. Do I have a teacher? No, I'm just sort of winging it. And I'm like, whoo,
Yeah, it's just a fine balance because
it
even the most
is.
well-intentioned teachers, if they believe that their way and their path is the only valid one, and that if every other person followed it, the world would be
True,
perfect.
true.
That's the danger. And also the other danger is that we surrender our own autonomy and we believe that we're not capable of knowing what's best for us. Only that other enlightened person is, or,
Right,
you
right.
know. So, yeah, everything is a balance. And it's a tricky one because, like you were saying about recognizing that life is short and that happiness and success aren't guaranteed and there's always going to be some suffering, that can go too far too into depression. And then why should I live at all? And prevent us from fully living and doing things that can change the bad things or reduce the suffering. uh,
I think that the book that I'm working on did save my life because it gave me this direction and project and something that I felt compelled to do to give back to my husband. Um, and I don't know if I would have survived without the book because it is a
yeah,
way to keep the conversation between us going as well. And in the book, he talks to me and I talk to him, and a lot of his writing will be in there as well. So I was, there's one question you told me to think about is what would you tell your younger self?
yes,
Oh my God. I think it would be find the thing. Don't find the person or the substance, but find the thing, the thing that you have to do. Find this mandate, find this mission, and then it's like editing. Things will fall by the wayside, right? You've got this body of writing and you're like, how am I going to edit out 500 words? And then somebody tells you you got to edit out 500 words, and all of a sudden you're like, okay. Um, because things that aren't essential to the project drop away. And I think I've spent most of my life doing things that are not essential to any project. Um, Getting drawn into bad relationships or drinking or just craziness. But then again, you and I are both here. Would we have been here? I'm getting more and more comfortable with being here and being this age and knowing myself. And I wouldn't have done that if I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I could
yeah.
have saved myself a lot of pain if somebody had said, no, don't do
I
that.
know that for me, as excruciating and painful as it was, that year-long severe depression where I wanted to die and started looking into ways to make that happen, that was necessary for the things I needed to let go of, the unhealthy behaviors, the addiction to others' approval and achievement as justifying my existence or proving my worth. Um, for all of that to die and for a healthier
Mm,
me to be resurrected or created from nothing, in a sense, that had to happen. One of the articles I wrote earlier when I started my Substack was, "What if mental breakdowns are necessary on the path to breakthroughs," or something like that. And I had a great quote from someone about it. But so, on the one hand, I absolutely do not believe that everything happens for a reason, and every horrible experience is ultimately going to be redeemed and lead to some great thing we just can't see yet. But on the other hand, I do very much believe that horrible experiences can be catalyst for um, renewed purpose, rediscovering our authentic selves, embracing our authentic selves, giving ourselves permission to live the life we always wanted to, that other people disapproved of or told us was not okay. All of those things. So, as with
I
everything else, it's a
remember
paradox and a balance.
I remember how yucky it used to feel, when they would say things in AA like, "We're gonna love you till you learn to love yourself," and I'd be like, "Ew," and like all these things about self-compassion. But literally, pretty much every hour of every day, I give myself a little talking to, and it usually is along these lines of, it's okay to feel this way. You don't have to, you can feel like hell. You can feel like killing yourself today. You can not do anything to let myself off the hook because I'm so hard on myself.
Same.
Um, is such a, oh God. And I was just thinking today, like, I'm nervous about going on here. And yesterday I had a live with one of my writers in my group, and I'm so nervous about all these things. What would it be like to say, well, the thing I say to myself is go fail because, you're not going to do it perfectly and you have permission to fail. Failure is an option. But what would it be like if I didn't have to tell myself that? What if it became my natural way of being to enjoy everything? Like, what would that be like? Like, oh, I'm excited because I get to have a live conversation, not, I'm so nervous. What is this standard that I'm constantly, if I'm holding myself to it, I'm holding everyone else to it, and it's not
Yes.
fair. It's
Right.
not fair. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I agree with you about the breakdown. And in the middle of some of those breakdowns were incredible spiritual experiences just because I completely lost the plot. And I was so dark in the grief. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, it would get worse. The house was being foreclosed on. People were taping notices to the door. I mean, it was just so instead of trying to scramble out of it, I guess it's surrender. You know what it is?
Yes.
It's surrender. When stuff happens that you really cannot control anymore and you have to surrender, that kicks in all this other stuff, like you were saying with your depression. And you just had to surrender to it for a while and see what. That's why I say on my site, I'm a resurrection enthusiast.
Yeah. And it's an ongoing process. It's not like any human ever fully arrives. Another one of my articles was self love is a never ending journey. Because,
That's for
yes,
sure.
now I write affirmations every night and that I actually believe. And, when I first started, I struggled to come up with one good thing about
Yeah.
myself. But at the same time, that doesn't mean I never beat myself up horribly and don't still have this harsh inner critic that loves to jump in and tell me about all the other people who are doing things so much better, faster, whatever than I am, and that I'll
And
never.
Substack is a perfect place
Yes,
to get the oh no's, like why are these people who are talking about nothing getting thousands of views with one kitten, picture
yes,
and
absolutely. Yeah, there are people who started writing like a month ago that have like three times the number of subscribers I do. And it's easy to like get
Oof.
into that comparison thing like, oh, I suck. No one really, why am I bothering? I'll never succeed. And especially with my paid offerings, because I'm trying to support myself. I mean, with help
Oh,
from my
me
husband, but
too. And it
yeah,
just, no matter how many subscribers I get, the paid is really the final frontier. And it's got to do with self-worth. That
yes,
everybody says it, right? And it's like the last sort of sticking point. Do you
yeah.
feel right?
and
It's
and for
self-worth.
me it's also about this misplaced guilt about charging for anything because I so much want to help everyone,
Right.
um, but yet I won't be able to help anyone if I am homeless and starving to death. And I
Yeah.
am struggling to pay the rent because I am so committed to making things as affordable as possible, if not completely free. And on top of that, because I have that ambivalence about charging, I hardly ever even mention my paid stuff,
I
you know?
know. I know. I
So,
really have to study with Sarah more on this one point. She's so good at it. And she does um, but now over the last 5 years, what want to, um,
Kara, I don't know if there's anything you can do about this, but your internet connection is unstable and you're like freezing and I can't hear you.
Once.
You are freezing up, and it says your internet connection is unstable on my end. My screen says that.
Yeah, I see it, but we just have to wait for it to become better. Did
Okay.
it go back? Oh my God, we've been talking for an hour.
Yeah, we're about to wrap up anyway. I just wanted to you to know that I didn't hear every word you said. If you wondered why I wasn't responding.
Well, the last thing I wanted to say is this, should I spend the rest of my life trying to keep the house, or what would my man rather have me give him, like the house or a book? And I believe that a book, I don't know why, but I believe that a book is more important than a house. And that's why, in order to create some kind of
Lakara has frozen up again. So since it is almost 3 o'clock, we will wrap things up. And I just want to thank everyone who joined us live. And the replay will be posted soon by Substack, and it will also be on my Substack page by Friday, and presumably on Kara's as well. So whether you're watching this now or watching the replay later, just know that we are grateful for your interest in our work. And I look forward to having many more of these conversations. And I'm grateful to all of the writers who have expressed interest and are either already scheduled or on my wait list. And I plan to keep having these conversations because I love connecting with others. And I'm in the process of creating a membership community, actually, so I can have conversations with more than one person at a time. Basically, it will include live Zoom gatherings and other ways of more interactive stuff. Because writing can be lonely, and as much as it's nice to get positive feedback from others, I want to also give them positive feedback and hear their opinions and life stories. So, um, thank you all for being here, and especially thanks to Kara. And see you next time. I will actually be the guest on a Substack Live that Andrea Amador is doing on Friday. So you'll hear more about that. And I will continue doing my own with other writers. So again, thanks for being here and have a great day. Bye.